One, and we're live. Hi, everyone. I am talking Welsh nationals this time with Russell. Hi, Russell.
Hello, bud.
Russell has been very nice and crunched some numbers for us. So this is sort of a meta video, though it's not in the format that I usually do, because Russell, you are the Excel spreadsheet wizard here, and can do stuff that I don't really bother doing anyways. Um, so we've already Russell and I have already discussed we're not going to go like over all the lists and all of that, because Tabletop Tommies and the Juggernauts have both reviewed the lists and the tournament. So we may show you a couple of the lists at the end, just talk about like a couple of interesting lists. I think we should include Felix's list in that one, because it's just so very interesting to me that he has appeared like he has. So yeah, we're going to talk about some of the stats that we can learn here at the, let's call it what it is, the end of version 2, more or
Yeah,
less. You and I are
in
both going to
theory.
one more big tournament, but then it's basically just like waiting for version 3, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm hoping on two. So I've got me and you. We're both going to be in Madrid, aren't we?
Yeah,
First week of
yeah,
June,
the Spanish Championships, yeah.
which is apparently 80 players. So that's a big event.
Yes, it's a really big
Um,
one.
so that would be a lot of data to look at. And
Yes.
then I am hoping to get up to Scotland, which I think is 23rd of September, and
Yeah,
that really will be the last one.
that really will. Yeah, that. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So right. And by the way, congratulations on your result. You ended up becoming the Welsh champion.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, second overall
Yep.
and defending Welsh champion. So very pleased to have done that.
Yep. And then with a list where I would normally have said, in my usual meta understanding of the game, that you couldn't win that one, but of course you had to prove me wrong.
Yeah, well, the lists are 5. You just think it's a 3.5, but
Yeah, true, true. Right, let's go over the stats, Russell. Let's see what it is.
okay. So just the event itself was 1,250 points, and it was 2 generic reinforced platoons. So that immediately starts affecting the meta and how
Yeah, it
people
does.
learn to play, of course, and approach.
Yeah.
And the big key here is when you do this, it does give players access effectively to 4 armoured vehicles. So
Yeah.
if they want to, they can create an armoured platoon,
Yeah.
which means if you don't take a lot of AT, you are taking a risk. I'm not saying
Yes.
it won't work, because I didn't take a lot of AT, but it is a risk you need to be aware of.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. And it's going to mean a lot of dice as well, generally speaking.
It is 1250 points. That is, I mean, 16 order dice would be the low end for me.
Yeah, well, we'll look
What
at
I would,
that. There are a couple
yeah,
lower, including
yeah,
me, which I know
yeah,
you don't like.
yeah, yeah.
The actual army selection. So if I go on to the armies there,
Mm?
so right, so I know that's very small font, so I'll explain what they say. So the top left-hand corner is 25% British. You've
Yeah,
got 13 British lists, and I think about 9 or 10 of those were Gurkha lists,
yeah.
including mine.
Mm.
You've then got, I think it was 11 Soviet lists, which performed quite well. 7 German lists, which were an absolute disaster. They were a disaster zone, and we'll look at
Yeah,
that when we look at performance. And then rounding off the major nations, you've got the United States with 5, and then there's 1 Japanese list tucked
yeah,
in there, just 1.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think that's completely understandable, because I've always said Japanese lists cannot cope with Gurkhas and they cannot cope with armour,
yeah.
at least not very
And
well.
this pack was going to mean Gurkhas and armor. So
Yeah,
yeah, just no way you can do that with Japanese. It just
yeah,
doesn't work.
it's doable, but it's very, very difficult. So
Very
I'm not
difficult. Yeah,
surprised to have
you're
seen that.
handicapping yourself if you're going to try and do that.
Yes,
Yeah,
completely agree.
yeah,
And then you've got 3 Italians, and you've got a couple of French, a couple of Hungarian, and then a mix of small nations. Actually, I think that's a fairly good mix. So a lot of people might look at that and go, "Oh, over 50% is 3 nations," but based
yeah.
on
Well,
tournaments we've seen, that's a pretty good mix.
yeah. There's a lot of people trying out different stuff here, and at least one of the minor nations did fairly well. So I mean,
Well, Yeah, a couple actually did. We'll look at that,
Yeah.
but the top 10 had 7 different nations, which I think is very good. That's really, really encouraging.
Yeah, it is.
We've seen a lot of tournaments where you might have 4 out of 5 being British or Russian, depending on the pack. So that's really good.
Yeah. So here at the end of version 2, the meta is still like people are still going towards Brits and Soviets as the main competitive nations, but a lot of people are still doing very, very well with other nations if they sort of fit their playstyle or whatever.
Yeah. If you practice your minor nation and you know it well, you can do very well with it, and we'll see that in the numbers.
Yeah.
So I've got on the next slide. This is the actual performance. So what I've done here is the average score for a player at the tournament was 9.04 points.
Okay.
So if you played your 5 games, the absolute average was 9.04. The highest was 17 and the lowest was 0.
Okay.
9.004 is your average. So what I'm doing, I'm taking the average score for each army list, and I'm looking at it compared to the overall average, and that gives me a percent. So the British list, for example, scored 12% higher than the average for the tournament. Soviet 6% higher. Minor combined, so I've combined all the minor nations because there were 15 of them. And just counting one on its own just doesn't tell you a lot. So they did pretty well. The Japanese list, to be fair, the player there managed to get himself 9 points. So bang on average.
Bang on average,
yeah. The US was slightly below, and Germany was.
I'm slightly surprised by the US not doing so well, actually. Because just off the top of my head, I would have thought that you could make some like really hard counters to tanks. You could still have access to your stewards. You could have a lot of flamethrowers. I mean, you could build some really multi-rocket launchers, double multi-rocket launchers at the same. I mean, you could build some really nasty lists, and they didn't really perform. So that is a slight surprise to me. The Germans not so much. I mean,
and to be fair to the US, at 94%, they are still pretty close to the average.
Yeah, they are.
What this actually shows, I actually think this is quite encouraging because no one is dominating any of those categories. Actually, being 112% is significant.
Yeah.
But it's not 125% or 100. No. So it's actually, if you run a British list, it's worth maybe an extra point across the tournament, which is quite encouraging. It shows you that the lists are not as important as people say, unless you're playing Germans. And just to be clear on the scoring.
Unless you're playing Germans, because that is also a significant downturn for the Germans, isn't it?
Huge handicap at this tournament. And just on the scoring, it was 3 points for a win. It was 1 point for a draw. And then every secondary was worth a bonus point.
Exactly. So you could get quite a lot of points for the secondaries, couldn't you?
Yeah, they were quite important, as we will see. So well-structured tournament, and there are your results. Within the minor combined, there's a real mix of different outcomes. The Italians performed poorly again. Yeah. So no one seems to have cracked that yet. And there were a couple of single lists. There was a single Polish Lancer list that did pretty well. And there was like a single partisan list which did quite well. And there was a Dutch list which we might talk about because it's getting a lot of coverage.
Yes, that Dutch list is so interesting. We're going to have to cover that as well. I'm sorry. I know other people have talked about it, but yeah.
Good. The other thing I've added, so if you look at this next slide, I know you're quite interested in how players perform. And what this is showing you at the bottom is there were 14 players at the tournament who have played in first teams. So I'm not counting second or third teams, but they've been in the first team at World Open War or one of the WTC tournaments. So these are people who have paid to go overseas and play as part of the national team. I'm not saying they're better players. I'm just saying they're obviously a bit more committed and that they're willing to make that financial investment.
And the odds are that potentially, at least, they are more trained and therefore better. So the odds are that they are better. But I mean, this pretty much clearly shows that they performed very well.
Yeah, well, whatever the list was, the average score was 13 points, which is really high. That's 4 wins and a draw almost. So you see how important secondaries are as well. So picking up maybe 3 wins, a draw and a loss, and a couple of secondaries is what was happening. Interesting, the third column, apologies, I haven't got a heading there. So the first column shows the number of players. So the British had 13, down to WTC 14, WOW 14. Then you have the number of points overall they scored, which I divide to get the average. And the final column, the third column, is their plus minus on dice. And this is fascinating because the 14 WoW WTC players had a plus 224 on dice kills, which is just enormous. Now you compare that to the British, who had plus 73 with basically the same number of armies, and you can see what's happening is the more experienced players are very, very good at killing enemy units.
Yes, they are.
And you can really see that there. So I just thought that was interesting for you to see.
It really is interesting. Also, if we look at what nations actually had a significant, like they were losing more order dice. So Soviets were losing order dice, Japanese were losing order dice, and the Germans were losing order dice. Whereas the US, the miners, and the Brits were taking order dice, like more than they were losing. That also is fascinating because that shows us something about what happens on the table. I've felt like this many times, but I haven't really had data to back it up. But I feel like Soviet lists, because they typically have so many small teams and stuff, they are losing order dice. And this actually shows that this happened. So that is also fascinating here.
Yeah, it's quite interesting with the US there as well. They're plus 36.
Yeah.
But they still scored slightly under average. So that's another thing for players to be aware of. Play the mission because it will make a big difference.
It will, yeah. I mean, 144% for the player type, let's call it that, and 112%. So it's only 12% difference for nation, but it's 44% difference for who you are. It really is. A lot. It's a lot of So that is pretty clear. Yeah,
it's pretty clear what's happened there. So the next slide, dice count. Now dice count is, so we've always agreed on player over list being more important, but obviously lists are still important.
Still important. I mean, that's obvious.
Good players play good lists. We know that.
Yeah.
But the other thing is dice count. Now I've always disagreed with you and said I actually don't think dice count's important. I think it's overly rated as a factor. However, at this tournament, what you've got here is a chart showing dice on the bottom. So how many dice does the player have? And then on the y-axis, the side axis, it shows their points scored. And the first one, that's a line of best fit. And what that shows you is it's incredibly correlated. So the more dice you have, the more points you're likely to get. And it's that's as clear as I've ever seen from any kind of diagram on this using correlation. Correlation is quite mixed typically, but this just isn't. This is very clear.
No, this is very, very clear. There are a few outliers though, but
there's a couple of strange ones. So like I'm in there. So if you look on the second hand chart, up at 15 dice, there's 3 players on 15 dice, and you get up to 16 points, and that's my list up there, which is a bit weird. So I knew it was quite a low dice count, but I didn't realise quite how low it was going to be. That kind of shows you can win with a low dice count, but you've got to play differently. But if you look at
you have to focus, and you have to be a good player. I mean, all of those factors need to work together, as with the terrain and who your opponent is. All of that has to work together. If you have the dice count, though, then you end up being in control of the pool of the order dice. And I think this is pretty clear that I would have thought that there was a curve to it at the end, but I mean, maybe we need like a larger sample for that to be obvious, but this one is very linear, isn't it?
Yeah, very clear. It's the case that if you take over 20 dice, you are 90% likely to score above the average at the tournament. So you can see what's happening there. It's quite interesting. Dice didn't matter, it would seem. Keep that in mind if you're building a list.
Can be important. Well, I might be building list. Actually, I already sent mine for the Spanish Nationals. So.
Oh, good. Mine's nearly finished, so we're comparing notes later. The other thing I wanted to mention, there was controversy is the wrong word, but there was discussion about the choice of missions.
Yeah.
So let me show you. There were 5 missions.
Mm.
Day 1 they played sectors, so good
Yep.
old sectors. On day 2 there was a version of Heartbreak Ridge they played. Now this is where you have an objective in the centre of the table, and then each player has one objective in a quarter of their
Yep.
own. On their side they pick a quarter, put an objective in, and then they put another one. So you've got maybe 5 objectives in total, 1 in the middle, 2 in each of your quarters. Bigger the better. That is basically a dice kill point mission, but you score points depending on the value of the unit. So if your unit is valued at 1 to 49 points, that's worth 1 point. 50 to 149 is worth 2, and so on. I've seen it played in Germany before, and it requires very little bookwork, and it makes the game a bit more interesting. So big objects, big units are more valuable. Season hold is very similar to Heartbreak Ridge, in that instead of 5, it's 3 objectives. Arguably, it's so similar, I'm not certain I would normally run both in a tournament.
Yeah, maybe a better spread between missions might have been a better idea here.
Maybe, but I don't want to criticise the tournament because it was incredibly well run. The missions were different, and the missions were released at the last minute, which I actually quite liked because it meant you couldn't prep.
Oh, I hate that. I hate
that. I really hate that. Your book was only this big, not that big.
Yeah.
And then the final mission was meeting engagement to finish. Just
I actually kind of like that, just because at the end you're knackered and you just want to play something very easy and straightforward. So like a kill points mission makes perfect sense. Yeah.
There is something to be said for that. And then I've just looked at, because a lot of people said, oh my goodness, Heartbreak Ridge, season hold, they've got draw written all over them, which was kind of the way I saw it. But with that said, Heartbreak Ridge, 23% of the games were a draw, season hold was 27%. So that is actually quite high. The average across tournaments is normally around 10%. But it's not so high that it's a real concern. I thought it was going to be higher than that, and it wasn't. So that's something. In fact, meeting engagement had the same number of draws.
Yes, that is weird. Yes. So actually, sectors would be better for the final match if you want to avoid.
Probably, and you see that a lot of tournaments. But I actually like the idea of it not being the final game for a change, because I'm used to it being the final game. And then games where no secondary was taken, because the secondary is an extra objective. This is where you see the big difference, 42% on bigger the better. Because I think it's because everyone is so focused on killing each other.
Yeah.
So the objective game gets left behind a little bit. That's
but they remember it for meeting engagement.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, it's interesting, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, it wasn't.
Well, maybe it's day 2 and they're fresh again, and so they can focus again. I don't know. Yeah.
Could be. And then the final thing, big win. By big win, I mean you win it and you get the secondary.
Yeah.
And you can see sectors and Heartbreak Ridge was around 50%, and then it drops down to that 1/3. So
that can also be something else. It can also be because with the Swiss draw, you start out with maybe like one player being completely out of the league of the opponent, so you get more like big wins to start with. But then you start meeting up with people who you're more on a level with.
That's exactly what I was thinking. That what happens is by the time you get around 4, round 5, you're getting more even matchups.
Yeah.
But in round 1, round 2, they're like round 1 is completely randomly drawn. And round 2, okay, you're playing someone. If you won, you're playing another winner. But it's still a level of randomness. It's only really from round 3 where you start to see Swiss kick in. And I actually think you're right. The results reflect that.
Yeah.
So that's quite interesting to see how the results are reflecting it. There is an argument, and I know the Spanish do this. It works really well. They give you more points for your first couple of games on wins, and then round 4 or round 3, you score fewer points. And the idea is it's harder to submarine, so you can't lose a game and then win 4 with easier matchups. You need to be winning all your games from the start to win the championship, which is quite interesting. Well, I'm going to have to do some analysis on that and see if it changes results. But,
there's also other ways to do it. At least we tried it out for Zealand Open, where you for the final game you only fight placement games. So for the top table, that would be number 1 and 2. No matter how that game went, no matter what happens to the points, that would be 1 and 2. And then and 4 and going down like that. So there are ways you can avoid that submarine, but of course, if you're going Swiss at any point during the tournament, there will be a little bit of submarining going on.
Yeah, definitely. It's inevitable that you'll have a little bit of that.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that maybe a little bit on strength of schedule. So I've got 2 more slides to show, really. You'd be pleased to know. So this is the final standings in the tournament. The key line is obviously points. And you had 3 players with 4 wins and a draw. The difference there being that Dan managed to grab 4 objectives. So he did a good job there on grabbing his objectives. So that went well. Then you've got myself and then Chris Davies in there as well. And you can see a few things there. So you can see point difference and unit difference. That was the tiebreaker. Was how many kills did you have? Take away your losses. And so that was in there as well. But the field, I'd say, is really strong. The thing to talk about there is you've got like the top 7, 8, 9. The top 9 players have all played at WOW or WTC level.
And so I mean, at least for the rest, there's more than a few names that also have played at international tournaments. So it's a really strong field.
I'll talk a little bit about the final round as well at some point, because it is very harsh on people such as where is he? Gary Morgan down at 11th. So his record, he had 3 wins and a draw going into the final round, which meant he was ranked 4th, I think, overall. And that final round can be brutal because you go from being, 4th to potentially being a winner of the tournament, and you drop to 11th on 1 result.
Drop all the way down.
Sadly, that's the nature of it, and it's harsh. It's a bit unfair. But I do want to give him a shout out because he was a really, really good player. He got some really good results as well. But that is the nature of the tournament, I'm afraid.
Yes.
So there's been a little bit of chat on strength of schedule. But I did hear about another YouTuber talking about it. And I just want to say, I think they completely misunderstand how to calculate it. You do not just rank. You do not use the rankings of your opponents and add them up. That is meaningless. And it's meaningless for a couple of reasons. So looking at the chart, for example, actually, let me put up strength of schedule chart. So strength of schedule
let's do that.
Here. Right, so this is how I would calculate it, and I would argue this is the only way you can do it sensibly. So I've taken the top 20 players there. Now what you've got there on the right hand side is what was the average score of their opponent in games. So I'm not interested in their rank, I'm interested in their actual points, because it's a lot more meaningful. And then the other thing you have to do, you remove your own result against them, because otherwise you're double counting against yourself.
Yes, you are.
All you're doing is showing whether you're a good or bad player. So it can penalise you a bit. So you remove results where the player played you. That still gives you 16 results for 4 players. So 20 results for 5 players. So there's plenty. That's big enough sample size to get a feel for it. And then by doing that, you can actually get a feel for how strong is your opponent with you removed as a factor, which I think otherwise it just doesn't make sense. And what you can see there is, to be fair, you would expect in a tournament that is Swiss for the top players to have the toughest schedules. And generally speaking, that did play out. So if you look at the top 10, there's only one player there who's got a record below 100%.
Yeah, Topher and Gary had the highest the highest strength of schedule, and Chris Davis is the only. He submarined a bit, didn't he?
He did. He must have drawn that game early, and he picked up a couple of. But you can only beat. I'm not going to criticise him in any way. I've heard people criticising players over strength of schedule, which is ridiculous.
That is
stupid. Who's in front of you? And let the end off. So I'm not interested in all this. Oh, my list was tough. I don't care. We're all at the same tournament. So that's just unusual. And you know what? He did a good job. He got the results he needed to get top 3. So good on him. Don't care. Also, strength of schedule can change a lot in the final game. I'm going to show you an example of that because, again, this isn't well understood. So what I'm going to do is, I normally get this wrong. So I'm going to try and share my screen. So share, screen window tab. Apologies if I get this wrong. You know it's me, Buzz. It's bound to go wrong.
Of course.
Let's see. National, I think this is one. Right. Okay, so I'm putting a data sheet up front. It's just loading. Right. Okay. So this is the hard data I've been using. Now I'm clicking on strength for schedule. And what I've got there, let me zoom in. Can you see the reversing results box there, Bo?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. So what that shows, this I thought was quite interesting. It shows Gary Morgan, Topher Buckle, Dan Lane, and myself. So we were basically ranked 1, 2, 3, 4, going in round 5. It shows you what their opponents had scored up to then. It then removes their score against opponents. So that's the key part of me removing.
And that means you're much closer, actually. Yeah.
Exactly. And then what I've done, I've switched the results over. So I've assumed Topher won, and I've assumed Gary won, which means the strength of schedule actually suddenly becomes 1.35, 1.35, 1.33, 1.31. So that gives you a feel for just how close those players were to each other, like incredibly close. And then that's why, you know, you've got to feel some sympathy for Gary and Topher and how far they drew, given that, you know, their schedule was tough. But it does show you that your own games have a significant outcome.
They do.
On your strength of schedule, because flipping those results, everyone's got the same schedule basically, which is quite interesting. Right, so let me go back to Teams. Excellent. Can you see me just me now, or am I still sharing? Stop sharing.
You're still sharing.
Okay, I can share. Right. So there you go, Bo. That's a summary. The event was excellent. 52 players, really high standard. It's the highest standard I've seen since WTC. I would say I had one game that I considered comfortable. My 4 other games were very tough, very tough.
Nice. That's really what you want, isn't it? Because then that means that not only like the top players, there'll always be like strong opponents to fight, but that means also that most of the field actually was actually interesting. So it wasn't just, you know, like you had a few easy wins to start with, but
it was that kind of game. So that's fantastic. That's what you want. The venue, you can't, you know, the venue is fantastic. The tables, they did a great job on the tables. There was variation in the tables. Now, some players have been moaning a little bit about that. And at the tables, I don't. Again, that for me makes it more interesting. You've got a bigger challenge.
You are known for your weird table tables, Russell.
I suppose so. Yeah. But you know, okay, it does mean you may get a table that's not really balanced for you, but that's fine. Get on with it. Happened to me a couple of times, and you just get on with it. You know, it's part of the fun. The lists were great. The people playing were great. The TOing and the refereeing was good. There were only 2 of them managing 52 players. That is very difficult to do, but they did it. So it's an event I would strongly recommend. I'm sure under V3 it'd still be a great event, but it's quite possible, depending on. There's only one event that can outsell this in Britain, really, this year, and that will be the GT, which is Warlord's event in August at BritCon. I know they're hoping to get 60 tickets, and that will be a great event. So I would say if you can go to that. I think it's in Nottingham. Sorry, it's in Nottingham. That's the only one that will come close. We will be 48 for World Open War, so we'll be 4 below. And I'm not tempted to try and change it to be bigger, because 48's enough. But a great event. There was a lot to learn from the event. Lots of different playing styles, and there's some differentiation in lists as well, which was good.
Right, before we finish off, can we just, like, you and me go and check out the top 4 lists?
Sure.
Because, like, let's just see what it actually was that won here.
All right, so let me get Dan's list up. Right, okay, I'll just get that positioned, and then I'll share it. So let's see, so this is a bit where it always goes wrong. Let's Google, right, okay, here we go, share. Here Right, okay, yeah. So I'm going to have to share screen because it doesn't want to show it. Share screen. Oh, here we go. I've got it. Right, hopefully, can you now see a list there?
Yes.
Excellent. Can you see it clearly enough, though?
I can. If you can
Good.
enhance it a little bit, that would be good. But
Right, okay, let's
we
try and
can
zoom
see it.
in.
Yeah.
Okay, is
Right.
that better?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
great.
Dan himself says that he made this list to counter Gurkhas because he knew there was going to be a bunch of Gurkhas here.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. I'm not seeing it.
I'm not seeing it. I think what he's done, like this, in theory, if your Gurkhas get into him, you're going to rip him apart.
In theory,
But
yes.
he's probably gambling that you've only got 3 or 4 Gurkha units.
Yeah.
The other risk with a unit, if it came up against a cavalry unit, it could be in trouble because what he's done is he's basically spammed 25 dice.
Yeah.
And he's built it so it's a French list that gets him about 150 points. So it's actually a 1,400 point list, which is great if you can do that. So loads of inexperienced infantry. They will do nothing except get fired.
He gets the extra unit because he takes 3 inexperience. He takes the extra medium artillery with a spotter. He buys that one. He takes early war motorcycles, which are great. One of them with an AT rifle. I like that.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea given you're going to face vehicles. And then if I go down for the rest of it, you see you've got.
And then here comes the cavalry, the regular cavalry. That is difficult to play. I've been messing around with my partisan cavalry. I think it's a really finicky thing to use.
Yeah.
And engineers and a sniper. Yeah.
And so you see he's got the bikes again doing the same thing. So it's just a repeat, really, rinse and repeat. So the key is it's 25 dice. So he's going to overwhelm your numbers.
He is.
And as soon as you fire at anything, he can just put it down.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't really care.
Or Reiki or whatever, And he's got 3 HE howitzers shooting at you every single time.
He's got a lot of mobility, so he can move vehicles around that can contest. He's got some recce in there. Cavalry can move around and grab units. And it's just a case of just overwhelming you. He'll just pick away, and he'll wait and hope, I think, that the artillery starts hitting things, because that's his real kill. He's got 3 artillery pieces, 2 medium and 1 heavy. Medium there, just at the bottom, you see it's a heavy one. So he's just going to pick at you. He can fire indirect if he wants, surrounds them with inexperienced infantry, so you can't get at them, and just wait for results. He had 4 wins and a draw. His draw was against Felix, so we'll be looking at that list as well, I guess. But look, I've run this list before. It's a good list. It really works well. The risk is you lose dice quickly against an opponent who realises he can rip an arm off you quickly. But actually, the missions, as they came out, and this list would have been built before the missions came out, so he hasn't get it for the missions, but they're kind of ideal for him.
It fits really well for the missions. It really does.
Other than meeting engagement, this is a great.
Other than meeting engagement, this is like the list you want to go with. And even meeting engagement, you can castle up in one corner if the enemy can't get to you, and they'll have to run into all that artillery. It's going to hurt.
Yeah, you just wait. You wait until you start getting hits. It's the key.
Yes,
It's a very and with Dan running it, who is a fantastic player, I'm sure it was horrible to face. That is your winning list. 25 dice.
That is the winning list. Nice.
So there you go. You do not need to run Soviets or British to do stuff.
And you can even take a bunch of inexperienced infantry and still win.
Yeah, and the key here, as I say, when he says it's an anti-Gurkha or anti-Stuart list, I think what he really means by that is he can afford to take hits and just go down. So he's got so many units, you can't take him off.
And then he has the anti-tank rifles to move up and shoot the Stuarts in the side. He's got the artillery to try and shoot Gurkhas, or at least threaten the Gurkhas away. I think the only thing I feel like is slightly lacking here is some anti-tank capability. He does have the engineers, right? But that is
he's playing there. Well, he's got the three howitzers will do it because they're going to be +3 penetration, and the heavy one will be +4. So that's your anti-tank to some degree. He's got the flamethrowers if he can get them in close as anti-tank. He's got the anti-tank rifles. He's actually got about 6 dice that can hurt the tanks, which is quite useful.
And then pin them, I guess. Yeah.
So it's a good list. So that's that one.
Really, really good. Nicely done, Dan.
Right, I suppose in second place, I'll put mine up then.
Yes, let's see yours, because this was an
It's very
outlier.
different, which is kind of nice, but there's a completely different
Yep.
approach. So again,
Yep.
I'm going to have to zoom in because my list is horribly formatted. Oops.
Whoa.
So apologies
Okay.
for that. Right, I'll discuss it because it's hard to see. Apologies. Reese did complain to me about how bad my formatting was, but it's basically a 15 dice Gurkha list. So what it's going to do, it's got a second lieutenant. It's then got, so it's got 2 second lieutenants. It's got 4 units of Gurkha. Those units are all 7-man, and they've all got 5 SMGs.
Not Paris.
They're Gurkha Paras. Sorry, yeah, Gurkha Paras.
Okay. Yeah.
Because that gives me the SMGs and stubborn. And they are basically how I'm going to try and win the game. Because they're going to try and get in close, but they don't need to charge you. Because they've got the SMGs, they can still clear you off without charging. So they don't fight. They don't actually charge a lot. That's not their job. You've then got 2 medium mortars that are regular, because I like them hidden, which are just going to throw shots at anything that doesn't move. I've got a sniper. Sniper's job is just to pick off anything that shows itself. So that's secure and experienced mortars. I've then got an M3 Lee. That's my main anti-tank weapon. There were a lot of M3 Lees this year. That's a new development.
I think they're copying you.
Yeah, maybe.
The insanity is catching. I even got myself a Lee now as well.
They do work like that. The key with them is their armor 9. So if you get into a duel with a Stuart or something similar, you've got a big advantage over them. So I took a Marmon Harrington, which is a British armored car with 2 machine guns. I took 2 of those, and their job is basically I pair them with a Gurkha. So so the Gurkha goes up with the Marmon Harrington, and the hope
shoot, they go down, and then the Gurkhas move up close. And
they can finish it off if they need to. Yeah, absolutely right. That combination works really well. So I play in combinations where I can. So I just put the second part of it up, but I've kind of talked through it already. And just confirming. See, the other tank is I'm not going to take 2 M3 Lees. So the other tank is a Stuart, which does what Stuarts do, just fires back up. So the list for me it's low on dice count, but every unit is pretty much doing a job, which is what I like.
Every unit except maybe the lieutenants is
they're the only
very
unit.
dangerous. I mean,
and they were still useful. They did grab an objective for me one game.
Okay.
So I do use them, and I only lost over 5 games. I only lost 12 units, and one of the reasons is the Gurkhas and everything else is very hard to kill. The lieutenants I often lost, but I used them as throwaway units to just basically annoy the opponent. So it worked well for me anyway. It worked for me. So that got me to second. So in third was a Russian list. So we've had a French list, a British list, and now we've got a Russian list, which is Chris Davies. Get that up. Okay, that's better. Oh, sorry, I said Russian. He went British. My bad. I do apologise. So there you go. He's got another Gurkha list, but he's using Gurkhas, not Gurkha
20 order dice here. Yeah.
So it's a bit more traditional if you want.
Wow, those are big units of Gurkhas. They're
9-man units. Yeah. So you are not going to want to fight them. See, for me, they're probably bigger than they need to be, but you still want to get to 20 dice. So he's got his mortar regular, which I like. I know you Europeans, you crazy Europeans, you like to go inexperienced, but us Brits, we know better. We take spots.
Yeah, you know better. Yeah.
You've got the flamethrower. You've got a light artillery, so 25-pounder again with a spotter.
And you got the early war motorcycles.
Yeah, that's how he's getting his dice count up, because they're only 35
That is how
points.
you get the dice count up with the Brits. Yeah.
And then he's got a Jeep for the flamethrower, and then inevitably the Stuart.
Yes.
And then it's rinse and repeat. He's going to do the same thing again.
More or less the same as Piat. Okay.
He's got a Piat. He's got an SAS Jeep, because it's just for 60 points. It's carrying a lot of shots.
Cheap. It really is. Especially if you can move it up and then turn sideways and get something in both arcs.
Position. If you can, then it's horrible. But getting it into position is very difficult. Very difficult. I think sometimes it's a bit of a trap, because people try that and end up losing it.
It is still a soft skin vehicle. I mean, smaller fire will kill it.
So it could be a bit of a trap. You've got a truck for some of the engineers and another Stuart. That's a good strong list. And
very meta list. The only thing I'm sort of missing here for it to be completely in the meta for Brits is 1 unit of engineers. But he has got a flamethrower team, so
he's got the flamethrower. So so he is addressing it there. But I agree with you completely. That's maybe the difference I'd make. on it.
Yeah.
But he runs it really well. It works for him. It's a great list. Gurkhas with 20 dice.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. That gets us to 4th place, I believe.
Which is Felix. So I wanted
Yeah,
to
so this is
show
interesting.
this to
Let me
people
just
because
confirm,
this
it
is an
was
interesting
indeed,
list.
was it Felix? It was Felix, and then we got Manuel at 5th.
Yeah.
So just with Felix, I want to give Manuel a mention as well, because he also had a fantastic, he went 4 wins and a loss, I think, with a Hungarian list he's not really played, so that's quite impressive.
Nice.
So let's have a look at Felix. Right, okay, this is a 27 dice list.
Wow.
It's
Look
Dutch,
at that.
but it's the Dutch-Indonesian forces.
Yeah.
And so what he's doing is spamming lots and lots of super cheap Shirker units, which again, he's going to do the same as Dan can do. He can just put them down. Whenever you fire at them, he can put them down.
Yeah.
If you look at the way they're structured as well, it's an 11-man unit. He's got 6 pistols and 5 rifles. So he's not going to be firing at you. The pistols they're cheaper, and they also let him get a tough fighter.
Yes.
So he can throw more hordes at you if he wants to. So it's a bit like playing a 15th century army, if you want. And he's got loads of infantry because he's going to rinse and repeat. He's got the inexperienced mortars. He's got the sniper team, anti-tank rifle, light artillery. That he's taking it inexperienced, so he's clearly using that just to throw shells over the top at you.
Yeah, he is.
Interesting. He's got his 3 medium artillery piece. Horse makes up numbers. An armored car, the Alvis Strasser. This is good. I like this, and I think it's only this army that can really get access to it. It's 10 shots. It's got 7 armor. And it's recce.
Recce,
It's only
80
points.
That is cheap.
It's basically my Marmon Harrington.
Yep.
Is what it is. Does the same job. And look at that. He's got a Marmon Harrington in the other
He's
slot.
got a Marmon as well.
CTLS. See, again, a CTLS gives him an extra machine gun. And it's the same cost as a normal Marmon Harrington because it's got no recce. So that's 15 shots. So the list is all about these like light armor units running up to you and putting 25 shots into you, while everything else just goes down.
And he's sort of waiting for you to do stuff, which he can wait because he's got 27 order dice. So he's waiting for you to do stuff. As soon as you've done stuff, you're not down anymore. He can push up that armored car and just dagger you to bits.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really, really clever. Really
absolutely.
clever.
He's got.
Look at the amount of utility trucks.
It's incredible, yeah.
Wow.
So by the rules, he doesn't need them to actually be transporting anything. So he's just taking them basically as mobile light anti-tank guns.
Yeah.
Which is clever. So
Anti-Steward. God damn it, that's a lot of anti-tank.
Yeah, and that's the first platoon. And then you look at the second one, and again, I say it's pretty much rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
Adding what you can. So there you go. There's your Marmon and your others. The one thing yeah. So the one risk he runs, I think, is on the turn against the British list. If they can get a bombardment in on him, or if he's against a list with lots of MLRS, because he's going to be filling up his table.
Yeah.
Again, the missions suit him as well. We got missions there that are sector missions. But how the hell are you meant to get an objective off of him when he's got that many units? It's just a very tough ask. So the list is very well designed. And again, it wasn't designed for the missions that were there because they were released late, but it does work very well with them. It's a lovely list, and it's so nice to see something different being used. My concern would be if you're running this list with 27 dice and you come up against someone who's got, say, 25 dice or 22 dice or whatever, are you really going to get through 6 turns?
Oh, that is a problem, isn't it?
Because that's 47 dice.
The time limit is going to be a real problem, as is like actual physical fatigue for pushing around that amount of minis.
Yes. Yeah. So I suspect this list, if it was in Spain, where we're using clocks, would actually lose a lot of games because I think he's going to run out of time on it a lot.
Yeah.
That's just my take on it. But actually, it's great to see a list that's different. I have to go off and work out how to beat it. I think Japanese, funnily enough, could do a good job against this.
Yes.
Because they would get into it with the magnets.
Just because, I mean, banzai charge and then get into close combat and beat it there. Yeah.
And the other list I'd like to see play is Savoia Cavaliera.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Oh. You still lose a couple of those Savoyas just to all the ducat that's being like pushed
God,
up
yeah.
in retaliation, but
it would be worth it just to take out a couple of units. So that's the other list. So they are the top 4 lists, as it were, that did really well. I'm going to close this. I can come back onto this and stop sharing, and that should be my ugly face back up there.
That was brilliant. Thank you so much, Russell, for showing this to us and for crunching the numbers once again. That was actually very, very interesting. A lot of interesting points here. I'm really interested to see what happens to all of this as soon as we get into version 3 as well.
Yeah, it very much depends on whether they've decided to aggressively address kind of any of the issues, as it were.
Yeah.
Or whether they're just softly improving the game, but we won't know until we see a release.
It will be
I
extremely
think it's
interesting.
to release September 23rd or something like that.
Yeah.
I think that was announced.
Yeah.
And they have said they are making some changes. So people who are interested, Warlord have kind of shown their skirt a little bit. You can go and find out a little bit.
And I have been promised that someone will come onto my channel and talk a little bit once they're ready to lift the skirts a little bit more. Maybe at some point, we'll see.
That would be great. That would be great. The only thing I would say on it is inevitably, this happened with version 1, and it happens every time there's a new release. Initially, people will probably complain because we don't like change.
No.
Whatever they've done with it or whatever they're going to do with it, I would say, like even me, I might complain and go, I don't like that, I don't like that. We tend to focus on the things we don't like first.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important when it does come out, we all give it a few games to see what
give it a go.
Like. Yeah. And then we can moan.
Then we can moan. Right. I will moan a lot on this channel then, as they ruined the game for me completely, because assaults are now no longer a thing, and I have to sell my Gurkhas.
The Gurkhas will be 25 points. Yeah.
That'll be a thing. Right. Thank you so much, Russell, for this, and
Pleasure,
we will see you in Spain.
Will do.
Cheers.